In the Wehrmacht, one job killed the men who did it faster than any other. Not the tanker sealed in his steel coffin, not the paratrooper falling into enemy lines, not the U-boat crewman rusting on the seafloor. This was worse. The men who took this job usually did not live long enough to be promoted. On the Ostfront, some units cycled through them in weeks. In Normandy, some lived for hours. On a bad day, minutes. To understand why, you have to picture the position first. 2, sometimes 3 men, dug into a shallow scrape at the edge of a wheat field or wedged inside a concrete bunker overlooking a beach. In front of them, a black steel weapon on a bipod, its perforated barrel jacket already warm from a test burst. Beside them, a stack of green ammunition cans. Belts of brass cartridges are threaded like snakes across their laps. The man on the trigger is called Schütze 1. The man beside him, Schütze 2, carries an asbestos glove in his pocket. He will need it soon. A third man crouches behind them, feeding ammunition, praying his belt does not tangle. None of them are older than 25. Most are teenagers, and most of them know, the moment they look through the sights, that they are already dead. They just do not know when, because the enemy is coming, and the enemy already knows exactly where they are. You see, the moment this weapon speaks, every rifle, mortar, and sniper for a kilometer will turn toward the sound. The job of the 2 men behind it is to keep firing anyway. That is the deal. And in a moment, we will look through the sights with them. Imagine you are on the other side of the wheat field. You are an American rifleman in Normandy, or a Soviet conscript picking your way through a bombed-out village near Kharkov. You have been told the enemy position is somewhere ahead. You do not know exactly where. Your officer waves you forward. You step out of the tree line. That is when you hear it. It does not sound like a machine gun. It sounds like someone tearing a bedsheet in half, only faster, only louder, only from every direction at once. The Soviets called it the linoleum ripper. The Americans called it Hitler's buzzsaw. The Germans called it the bone saw, the Knochensäge, and they were the ones aiming it at you. The weapon fires 1,200 rounds per minute. On some models, closer to 1,500. That is 20 rounds every second, so many, so fast, that your ear cannot separate the individual shots. It hears one long, tearing scream. By the time you register the sound, 3 or 4 men to your left are already down. They did not shout, they did not clutch their chests, they just folded, quietly, as if their strings had been cut. What most people do not realize is that the US Army, at one point in the war, had to produce training films specifically to help its soldiers cope with the psychological trauma of hearing this weapon. Not to fight it, not to kill it, just to hear it and keep moving forward. Most could not. Most froze. And when you froze in the open, in front of that weapon, the 2 men behind it did their job. In the next 90 seconds, half your squad would be gone. And that was a good day, because on a bad day, they had a full ammunition can and nobody to save you. Back on the German side, in the scrape at the edge of the wheat field, the work does not stop. After 250 rounds of sustained fire, the barrel of the weapon glows a dull cherry red. Fire much longer and the rifling inside will warp, sending rounds spinning wildly into the sky. So Schütze 2 grabs his asbestos glove, snaps a lever and pulls the smoking barrel out. He swaps in a fresh one. A trained crew can do this in under 6 seconds. 6 seconds. In combat, with enemy fire cracking overhead. And they do it again and again, sometimes 20 or 30 times in a single engagement. Meanwhile, the third man, the munitions Schütze, is dragging steel cans of belted ammunition through mud and bodies to keep the weapon fed. Each can weighs around 20 kilograms. Each holds enough ammunition for roughly 12 seconds of firing. He is always moving. He is always exposed. And here's the thing most people do not understand. The moment the weapon fires, every enemy on the battlefield knows what to do. Snipers zero in on the muzzle flash. Mortar crews call in the coordinates. Tanks turn their turrets. American infantry are trained to flank, to crawl toward the sound. Lob grenades into any window or slit that might be hiding those 3 men. Losses among these crews were disproportionately high in every theater of the war. One estimate puts their casualty impact at roughly 15 times that of a regular rifleman. But the cost was mutual. If you were sitting behind that weapon, you were the first thing on the battlefield everyone wanted dead. By late war, replacements arrived with almost no training. They were handed the weapon, shown the trigger, and told to hold the position. Many of them fired their first live burst and their last live burst on the same afternoon. The equipment outlasted the men who used it. So what does it do to a man to sit behind that weapon for a day, a week, a month? The first thing to go is your hearing. Modern soldiers wear ear protection. He did not. After a single engagement, he could not hear his loader shouting from 30 centimeters away. After a month, the ringing never left. Veterans of these crews often lived the rest of their lives with permanent, screaming tinnitus. Then there is the smell. Cordite, hot oil, scorched metal, and burning cloth from the barrel jacket. Under it, the smell you cannot describe to anyone who was not there. The smell of what happens when 20 rounds per second cross open ground and find human bodies. Then there is what happens inside your head. He watched loaders die beside him, sometimes killed by a bullet meant for him. He watched enemy soldiers, some of them boys his age, crawl toward his position and be cut apart at 50 meters. He fired until the belt ran empty, then reloaded, then fired again, sometimes for 6 or 8 hours straight, until his hands cramped shut around the trigger. One Austrian conscript trained on this weapon on the Ostfront in 1943. A young man named Josef Allerberger wrote later that within his first few days of combat he understood, clearly and without drama, that he was not going to survive. He requested a transfer. He became a sniper instead, which on the Ostfront was considered a career upgrade. Think about that. If you were offered a sniper's odds as the safer option, that tells you everything about the job you were being pulled out of. And still, the German army needed thousands of these crews. They needed them at every hedgerow in Normandy, every tree line in the Ardennes, every ruined apartment block in Stalingrad. Someone had to sit behind that weapon, and someone always did. To understand what one of these crews was capable of on a very bad day, we need to go to a bluff overlooking a beach in Normandy. It is the morning of the 6th of June, 1944. The position is called Widerstands Nest 62. WN 62, a cluster of concrete bunkers and open trenches, dug into the sand and grass above what the Allies had named Omaha Beach. Inside one of those trenches is a 20-year-old German soldier from Lower Saxony. His name is Heinrich Severloh. His friends called him Hein. Picture yourself in that trench, 20 years old, watching the largest fleet in human history appear at the horizon at dawn. Hein was an MG Schütze 1, a machine gunner, the Richtschütze of an MG Trupp, the man behind the trigger of an MG 42. That is the job. That is the answer to what we have been describing this whole time. The most dangerous job in the Wehrmacht was the one Hein Severloh had that morning, and it was about to become the most dangerous job in the world. At around 6:30, the first American landing craft dropped their ramps at the waterline below. What Severloh saw through his sights was described later, in his own words, as young men in green helmets wading into water up to their chests, then falling. He opened fire. He did not stop for 9 hours. Between roughly 6:30 and 15:30 that day, Severloh later claimed to have fired around 13,500 rounds through his MG 42, plus another 400 through 2K AR-98K rifles kept close by. His barrels changed so many times he lost count. He said decades later that he became physically sick from the killing. The Americans landing on that stretch of Omaha Beach would give him a nickname that stuck for the rest of his life. They called him the Beast of Omaha. And on the morning of D-Day, one man in a trench doing the job we have been describing held up the largest amphibious invasion in human history for the length of a workday. But the job did not end when the shooting stopped. Machine gunners like Severloh knew what they were signing up for at the moment of surrender. Across every front of the war, from Normandy to Stalingrad, Allied and Soviet infantry had a particular hatred for the men behind these weapons. They had watched their squad mates die in windrows because of them. When positions were finally overrun, machine gun crews often did not make it to a prisoner of war camp. Many were killed on the spot, hands still raised before an officer could intervene. On the Ostfront especially, the words "no quarter" were understood on both sides without ever being spoken. Imagine trying to surrender to the men whose friends you were cutting down 30 seconds earlier. Severloh was lucky. He surrendered the day after D-Day and was taken alive. He spent the rest of the war in Allied captivity and eventually went home to a farm in Germany. But home was not the end of it. For the rest of his life, Heinz Severlo was haunted by what he had done that morning at WN62. He said he saw the faces of the young Americans in the surf over and over for 60 years. He wrote a book about it. He met and publicly reconciled with an American veteran who had landed on that same stretch of beach and survived his fire. And he died in 2006 in his old age, still turning the same 9 hours over in his head. That was the deal. The most dangerous job in the Wehrmacht did not just kill the men who did it in combat. It killed something inside the ones it let live. The tinnitus never left. The smell never left. The faces never left. Someone had to sit behind that weapon. And for the ones who walked away, the weapon was never really put down.